The sky above the planet Noria had turned dark, not from clouds, not from storms, but from warships. Hundreds of them, sharp, angular, cruel machines built not for defense, but for fear. The Red Fang Union had arrived, and with them came fire. Cities fell in ours. The central power grid collapsed in less than a day. Communication towers exploded one by one until only a single transmitter remained in ancient. Deep space beacon hidden beneath the capital's old archives. It had been buried long ago during the last Galactic War, forgotten by most. It was their only hope. High Counselor Velerin stood in front of the last working console. His hand shook, blood dripping from a cut across his temple. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Around him, technicians worked in silence, eyes hollow. They all knew this was not a call for victory. This was a signal of surrender. He pressed the final sequence. His voice carried not just through space, but time. This is Noria, broadcasting to any who still listen. We do not call for war. We do not ask for armies. We ask only for mercy. If anyone hears us, please help us. Wait. Help us before everything burns. The transmission ended, and for a moment, there was silence. A silence that stretched from the dusty vault under Noria all the way to the edge of known space. Thousands of species heard the call. The Concord Council, bloated and slow, dismissed it. The wealthy trade guilds ignored it. The great empires, afraid of Red Fang retaliation, stayed silent. No one wanted to provoke the wolves now circling Noria. No one, except one. Deep in the black stretch of the Perseus Arm past abandoned star, lanes and broken war zones, a signal flickered to life. It wasn't a reply, not in the way most would expect. It carried no emotion, no diplomatic greeting, no declaration of peace. Just a simple Terran-coded burst repeated every 3 seconds. Received. Approaching. The galaxy held its breath. Earth. Humanity. The Deathworlders had answered. Most hadn't heard from them in decades. After the Swarm War ended, the Terrans vanished, returning to their isolated system, building quietly, saying nothing. Some thought they had grown tired of war. Others believed they were hiding. But now, with one short message, they proved they had only been watching. And now, they were moving in the orbital command ring above Noria. Admiral Sarix of the Red Fang Union stared at the incoming data feed. His jaw twitched when he read the signal. Terrans, he spat. You're joking. His communication officer shook her head. Confirmed Terran encryption. Ghost band transmission. It bounced through 17 abandoned satellites before hitting our net. They're definitely coming. Let them, Sarix growled. They think we'll be scared of old myths and dead warriors. We've burned bigger systems than Earth. We crushed the Dathri. We leveled the Drekker homeworld. Let them come. But even as he said the words, something cold twisted in his chest. The Terrans didn't boast. They didn't announce a fleet. They didn't issue ultimatums. They simply said they were approaching, and that was far more terrifying. Back on Noria, the resistance fighters heard the same signal. Whispers moved through the underground tunnels like wildfire. Earth is coming, someone said. The Deathworlders. They answered the call. Many didn't believe it. Why would humanity care? Why risk war for a planet no one had heard of before this? But Velerin knew. It studied Terran history. It read the banned scrolls, the encrypted reports, the stories no one else wanted told. He knew what Earth really was. A world that bred survivors. A species that didn't run from monsters. They became the monsters when pushed. He turned to his aide, voice quiet. If Earth truly hurt us, he said, then we are not saved yet. But our enemies, they're already lost. The first shadow appeared over Noria's upper atmosphere 4 days later. A single dot on long-range sensors. No known design. Black hole. No energy signature. No identifiable engines. It moved without propulsion, as if it had simply decided to exist there. Red Fang ships scrambled to intercept, but within seconds, their scanners failed. Their targeting systems rebooted. Then their ships disappeared, just like that. No debris, no explosions. Gone. They remained silent, watching. More dots followed. 2. Then 6. Then 20-3. Each one took a position above the largest Red Fang fleet, hovering in orbit like black suns. Still, no transmissions, no warnings. Just presence. The Red Fang forces waited for diplomacy. It never came. At 0300 local time, Noria's night turned to day. The Terran fleet opened fire, but this was not normal warfare. No flashy laser shows, no drawn-out dogfights. The Deathworlder fleet moved like a scalpel-cutting power grids, disabling engines, freezing weapon systems. They didn't destroy, they crippled. And then they did destroy. Only the command. Ships. Only the war leaders. Each one reduced to vapor in a microsecond. Burst of focused particle fury, no collateral damage, no wasted shots, just justice. By sunrise, the Red Fang fleet was gone. Noria's skies were clear, and the Terran fleet still silent, still watching. Velarin climbed to the ruins of the Capitol Tower, now lit by the first rays of morning. He looked up, shielding his eyes, saw them black specks against the stars. He raised a trembling hand and whispered, "You heard us." There was no answer. But there didn't need to be, because Earth wasn't here to talk. It had come to send a message to the galaxy, to every empire that ignored the call, to every tyrant that thought peace was weakness. Humanity doesn't talk peace. They bring the Armada. The fires had stopped. The screaming, too. Where once the skies above Noria were full of death, now there was only silence and unnatural. Waiting silence that settled over the planet like a blanket of ice. The Red Fang Union was gone. Not defeated. In battle. Not forced to surrender. Just removed. Deleted like a bad memory. What had taken weeks to destroy, Earth had undone in a single night. Now the survivors, the broken, the few still standing on the ground, were left to understand what had just happened. And above them, the Terran ships hung still silent guardians or silent executioners. No one could say for sure. High Counselor Velarin walked through the ruins of the capital. Dust hung in the air like fog.
Ow.
Buildings leaned, broken and smoking, their steel bones exposed. The people were crawling out from hiding, children blinking in the new light. Elders carried on stretchers, soldiers staring skyward with weapons hanging useless at their sides. They had expected death. Instead, they found Earth. No one had spoken to the Terrans yet. No messages. No landings. Not a single word had been exchanged. Their ships, those black, silent shapes, remained high above the atmosphere, unmoving, as if waiting for something. Or watching. Then, from the western sky, a shape broke through the clouds. Sleek, jet black, the size of a small freighter, but faster than anything Noria's engineers could have imagined. It didn't make a sound. Not the scream of engines, not the thunder of descent, just presence calm, terrifying presence. It landed just outside the Capitol ruins, no weapons deployed. Soldiers marched out. Instead, the side of the ship hissed and opened, and from the smoke stepped 3 humans. No armor, no helmets, just gray uniforms with a crimson line across the chest. The lead figure was tall, his skin like worn stone, his eyes sharp with focus. Beside him walked a woman with close-cut hair and a device on her wrist pulsing with soft blue light. The third was younger, face calm, holding a case that clicked with every step. They looked like scientists, observers, not killers, but everyone. Watching knew better. Velarin approached them slowly, alone. Behind him, Norian soldiers watched, unsure if they should aim their weapons or fall to their knees. The humans waited until Velarin stood just a few meters away. The tall one nodded slightly. "We received your signal," he said. His voice was smooth but hard, like ice over steel. Velarin tried to steady his voice. You destroyed their entire fleet. Without a word. Without warning." "They were warned," the woman said. "Years ago, When Earth left the Galactic Council, Velerin blinked. That was before my time. Exactly. The younger human added. End it here. We are. There was no arrogance in their tone. No pride. Just simple fact. They didn't seem angry. They didn't gloat. That was what made it so terrifying. The Terrans weren't emotional about this. They'd come, they'd judged, and they had acted. Velerin gathered himself. Are you here to stay? To occupy? The lead Terran shook his head. We didn't come to take your world. We came to send a message. To who? Velerin asked. To everyone. The woman tapped her device. Holograms shimmered into view, dozens of names and flags and emblems spinning in the air. These are the species, the councils, the syndicates. Who received your call and ignored it. Velerin recognized some of them. The high markets. The Tovari Union. Even the so-called guardians of the Spiral Core. All had heard their cry. None had answered. The young Terran handed him a data chip. This contains the full record. Your original distress call. The Red Fang Fleet's communications. The orbital logs.
Aye, aye.
And our response? Broadcast it. Let the galaxy know what happens. When mercy is ignored, Velerin held the chip like it might burn him. They'll be afraid of you now. They already were, the lead Terran replied. He turned to leave. Wait, Velerin said. Why did you help us? No trade deal. No treaty. Why risk war for strangers? The Terran paused. For a moment he didn't answer. Then he looked back, and there was something ancient in his eyes. Something worn and bitter. Because a long time ago, said no one answered us either. We remember. The Terrans stepped back into their ship. It rose without flame, without sound, and vanished into the sky. Above, the rest of the Black Fleet began to shift slowly, carefully. One by one, the warships pulled away from orbit and disappeared into hyperspace. No goodbyes, no speeches, just silence. Velerin stood in the wind, the chip in his hand. Around him, the people of Noria began to rebuild, not because someone told them to, but because they still could. Because Earth had made sure they'd live. To see tomorrow, far across the stars, in the political chambers of the Concord Council, alarms were sounding. Reports flooded in from Noria. Earth had acted without approval. Earth had deployed a fleet. Earth had shown it was not a relic but a force. Some called for retaliation. Some demanded diplomacy. But most stayed quiet because they had seen the footage. They had seen what the Armada did, what it didn't do. They all understood the same thing now. Deathworlders don't talk peace. They become it with silence, fire, with precision. And when they leave, nothing dares rise against them again. The Concord Council was falling apart. Not in public, of course. On the surface, its towers still stood tall. Holograms still danced along glass ceilings. Trade ships still docked. Guards still marched in perfect lines. But deep beneath the polished floors, in soundproof chambers full of nervous eyes and cold hands, the galaxy's most powerful species were whispering about Earth, about the Terran Armada, about the fact that they had come, struck, and left without permission, without explanation, without apology, and most frightening of all, without staying. The war everyone feared never truly began, and that's what made it worse. War can be fought. War can be planned. But Earth's response had been something else. A punishment. A correction. A message. And now, no one knew what they'd do next. On a high orbital platform above the Tor Valley system, Trade Director Enther stood frozen before a massive tactical display. It showed all recent ship movements across 12 sectors. One line, just one glowed. Red dot, a Terran scout ship. Small, silent, unarmed. But it was enough to panic entire fleets into recall. Mining colonies locked down. Corporate transports rerouted. 2 military patrols in the nearby sector simply vanished from the logs after crossing that red path. They're just watching, said a nervous aide. No, Enther said slowly. They're letting us see them. What do we do? Enther didn't answer, because deep down he knew. There was nothing to do. Not now. At the same time, on the far side of the galaxy, One empire decided not to be afraid. The Zarketh Dominion. They had always believed in strength above all conquest, control, intimidation. They had laughed when Earth first disappeared after the Swarm War, called them broken, called them tired. Now Earth was back, and the Dominion wanted to test them. They called it Operation Needle, a precise strike. A message to humanity that they wouldn't be allowed to roam unchecked, their plan? Destroy a Terran listening post in neutral space, small target. Minimal risk. They didn't even tell the Council. It took 11 minutes. Not for the operation to succeed. For it to fail so completely that the Zarketh war room was empty by sunrise. What the Dominion hadn't known was that the Terran listening post wasn't unguarded, it was bait. The moment the first Zarketh missile launched, every single one of their ships, all 16, was tagged by Terran stealth drones. Not attacked, not disabled, just marked. Within 90 seconds, a single Terran destroyer uncloaked above them. Not the main Armada, not even a full battle group. Just one black ship. It didn't fire. It spoke. This was your one mistake. There won't be a second. And then it sent a data package directly to the Dominion Emperor. Full logs, decrypted. Plans, proof of aggression. The ship vanished. By morning, half the Zarketh command had resigned. The rest demanded to open peace talks. Earth did not reply. Meanwhile, the galaxy began to whisper again, not in fear, but in fascination. Why hadn't Earth retaliated harder? Why didn't they invade? What did they want? Some thought Earth was bluffing, hiding a weaker core behind strong ships. Others believed the Armada was just the surface of something deeper, a hidden network. It's a shadow fleet, something born out of a century of silence. And somewhere out there, on the edge of forgotten space, a prison station called Greywall suddenly went dark. No record of breach, no known visitors, but 3 high-level prisoners, war criminals. Slave lords, architects of the swarm, were simply gone, and on the outer hull, in red glowing script, someone had left 3 words. We remember everything. Back on Noria, peace had returned, but it was a nervous kind of peace. The skies were clear, the rubble was being rebuilt, but every night people looked upward, toward the stars. Toward the direction the Terrans had vanished, Veleran stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the new capital zone. Speaking into a private recording, to the Council he said, "You feared Earth would start a war. But I've seen their truth. They didn't start anything. We did. With silence, with weakness, with our cowardice." He paused, voice growing heavier. "They didn't come for glory, or land, or control. They came because we failed, because we made them remember who they were." He switched off the recorder, uploaded it to the Concord archives, and locked it with his seal. The title of the file was simple: The War That Wasn't Meant to Be. Far across the stars, within a ship that had no name, Commander Silas Ward stood inside a dim chamber where no lights ever touched the walls. The room held no chairs, no screens. It's only voices, his voice, and the voices of his kind. Echo. Division. He listened to the reports, watched the signals marked the Council's next moves, and he knew one truth: no one else had yet spoken aloud. This wasn't over, because the Council wasn't afraid enough yet. They still believed Earth could be handled, could be pressured, could be understood. They were wrong. And when they tried to test that belief again, the real war would begin. In the shadows of a dead star, where no light had touched space in thousands of years, Earth's most secret fleet waited. It wasn't on any star map. No beacon led there. If a ship passed through, its sensors would fail, its data would scramble, and its captain would never speak of it again. It was a place beyond fear, beyond diplomacy, a place the galaxy never acknowledged, because admitting it existed meant accepting something far worse than war: retribution. Inside the black-mirrored command chamber of the ISV Revenant, Commander Silas Ward stood before a silent screen. Well, he wasn't watching. He was listening. The transmission was short, shaky, and full of static, but the voice came through clear enough to carry intent. Planet Herox. Red Fang remnants have landed. Orbital station down. Someone. Anyone. Then silence. Herox wasn't. Even a core world? It was an old mining colony at the edge of the old war zone, abandoned by the Council decades ago. No military interest. No trade. No value. And yet the Red Fang had returned. No one else would answer. The Council would call meetings. The Concord would argue protocol. The trade guilds would count the cost. But Earth didn't need permission. Silas turned toward the center of the command floor, where 12 soldiers stood at attention, tall, armored, faceless. Echo Division. Earth's first and final response to threats the galaxy refused to face. They weren't diplomats. They weren't peacekeepers. They were the storm that came after mercy failed. No warning, Silas said. No broadcasts. No survivors from the Fang. Each Echo operative nodded once. The ship's engines didn't flare. No alarm sounded. No transmission announced their exit. The Revenant simply vanished. On Hirax, the people were already surrendering. They weren't fighters. Most were workers, miners, engineers, families who had refused to leave when the Council declared the planet unprofitable. When the Red Fang returned, they thought maybe this time, if they obeyed quickly, if they stayed quiet, they would be allowed to live. They were wrong. Towns were burned. Dome farms were. Shattered, the orbital uplink tower was torn down and displayed. In the central square as a warning, the Fang didn't want compliance. They wanted cruelty. Herix was to be a message. The Deathworlders can't protect you forever. The message changed 12 hours later. It began with a storm that came with no clouds. The air grew sharp. Static crawled through the wind. Then the sky cracked with blue, fire, silent, pulsing, unnatural. Locals stared up, expecting death from above, but the fire didn't fall on them. It fell on the Fang. The first strike landed at the edge of the war camp. A single kinetic rod dropped from orbit, impacting with such force that it left no crater, just a sudden absence of mass. Half a barracks gone. 30 soldiers erased. No one saw it coming. No one heard it coming. Seconds later, 5 more rods dropped. Then the soldiers arrived. They didn't come in waves. They didn't land in transports. They stepped out of nothing. Black armor that didn't reflect light, helmets without faces, movements like smoke. One moment the Fang were standing, shouting, aiming weapons. The next moment, they were screaming. Echo Division didn't shoot to wound. They didn't call for surrender. They moved in perfect, silent precision. Every motion calculated, every shot a kill. Red Fang soldiers panicked, running for cover, trying to regroup. But there was no safety. They weren't being attacked. Were being cleansed. The people of Herax watched from their shelters, their windows, their broken homes. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. Simply stared, because they had no words for what they were witnessing. Not rescue. Not battle. Something colder. Something older. The final Red Fang command vehicle tried to lift off flashing, its surrender code in every known language. It didn't get 20 meters off the ground before a black spear of metal fell from the sky and split it in half. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The sky cleared. The wind died. And Echo Division stood in silence in the central square, surrounded by silence, blood, and ash. Commander Ward stepped from the smoke, his armor clean, not a scratch on it, to the few civilians brave enough to emerge. He spoke one sentence. We answer what others ignore. Then they left back at the Concord Council. The footage of Herax went viral within minutes. Some claimed it was fake. Others demanded war crimes tribunals. Few whispered that Earth had gone too far, but most said nothing, because for the first time, in memory, the people of the galaxy, those without fleets, those without protections, started asking the same question. Why didn't we act? Why did we leave Herax to die? Why is Earth the only one that answers? Echo Division had done more than save a world. They had shown the galaxy what it truly was. Not a union, not a council, but a collection of cowards with too much power and too little courage. And Earth. Earth had shown what happens when you forget that the quiet ones are the most dangerous. On a forgotten moon somewhere near the edge of Terran space, a group of alien refugees waited nervously in a cleared-out hangar. They had sent out a distress call weeks ago. Pirates were circling, their escorts were gone. No one had answered until now. A Terran ship landed with no fanfare. The ramp lowered, an echo. The vision stepped out. The leader didn't speak, just handed. The refugee elder, a small tag with the Earth insignia burned into it. The elder looked up and asked, "Why? Why us?" The echo soldier replied in a flat, almost mechanical tone, "Because someone has to answer, and Earth remembers what it feels, like when no one does." The grand chamber of the Concord Council was colder than usual. Not physically, its climate systems were perfect, but in mood. The air was stiff with fear, tension, and quiet blame. 12 council seats, each representing a major galactic power, faced one another in a circle of polished obsidian. The walls gleamed with ancient banners, now meaningless beneath the shadow of recent events. At the center of the chamber hovered a massive holofeed. Footage of Herax played on a loop, the black-armored Echo Division cutting through the Red Fang like they were paper, the orbital rods falling with terrifying precision, and most disturbing of all the fact that not a single civilian had been harmed. No chaos, no friendly fire, no mistakes, just perfect, silent, absolute control. "They're not peacekeepers," spat Counselor Dren of the Torvali Alliance. His voice shook with fear, disguised as anger. "They're assassins. Ghosts. This was a slaughter." "And where were your ships?" countered Counselor Misa of the Corin League. "Where were ours?" "We all saw Herax's distress call and did nothing. Earth acted. We didn't. It doesn't give them the right to act without authorization." Dren slammed his fist into the table. Counselor Sothel of the Drethir Union leaned forward, his scaled face unreadable. "It gives them something more powerful than permission. Moral ground." That was the truth none of them wanted to admit. In the public's eyes across billions of citizens on thousands of worlds, Earth wasn't the enemy Earth had become. The only one listening? The Council had delayed action, debated strategy, waited for diplomacy. But Earth moved like a storm, and storms didn't wait. That same day, a vote was called. Some demanded sanctions, others proposed warnings. A few called foolishly for a united fleet to monitor Earth's actions. But one proposal rose above the noise, submitted quietly by Counselor Liaren of the Zalari Remnant. No, not for firepower, but for caution. Her message was simple. We either adapt to this new reality, or we perish in denial. The Council paused because Liaren was no friend to humanity. If she said the Council had to choose, it meant the old balance of power was gone. They had one real option: negotiate with Earth. Meanwhile, Earth knew the vote was coming before it was even cast, in a quiet chamber beneath. Earth's Terran High Command, known only to the oldest. Intelligence directors at table full of gray-haired officials reviewed the reports. Commander Silas Ward's Herax report. Intercepted Council messages. Public sentiment rising across fringe worlds. Colonies, mining belts. General Arya Morgan, the Supreme Commander of the Terran Armada, looked up from her data slate and said flatly they'll reach. Out in 3 days. They'll beg for peace talks. Not because they want peace, but because they've lost control. The others nodded. Another director added, "They'll want us to fold back into the Concord." Morgan didn't even blink. "We won't. If they demand it, we show them what Earth does to demands." As predicted, the Concord sent a diplomatic envoy to the edge of Terran space 3 days later. Not a fleet. Not a warship. Just a small, heavily shielded shuttle bearing the Council's golden insignia. It hovered outside Earth's orbital security ring, silent. Waiting, it was allowed through, not because Earth feared diplomacy, but because Earth wanted the galaxy to see how they handled it. The counselors on board were escorted to a deep space station, orbiting one of Jupiter's moons. They didn't see any Terran weapons, but they knew they were being watched. Studied, inside the main chamber, they met 3 Terran representatives, no generals, just 3 people. One was a war historian, one was a trauma medic, and the third, a civilian who had once lived through the swarm. War as a child. The message was clear. Earth did not come to brag about its weapons. It came to remind the Council what silence had cost them. The lead diplomat from the Concord stood, clearly nervous, and said, "We, representing the unified voices of the galaxy, wish to open dialogue, to discuss peace, limits, cooperation." The Terran medic, an older woman with deep lines under her eyes, replied softly, "Where was this dialogue?" When Herex burned, no one had an answer. She continued, "Where was this cooperation when Noria screamed for help? When children died in mining tunnels while you counted credits and avoided war?" Still silence. Finally, the Terran historian placed a datapad on the table and activated it. Holograms sprang up, footage from across the galaxy. Unanswered distress calls. Ignored war zones. Pirate activity logs. Slave colonies. Hundreds of them. All under Council watch. None had been helped until Earth returned. "You don't fear us because we're dangerous," he said coldly. "You fear us because we showed your people what real justice looks like." The civilian leaned in, voice quiet but cutting. "And now you're afraid they'll start asking for more of it." The delegation returned to the Council with trembling hands. They gave their report. No peace treaty, no surrender, just Earth's warning. Clean your house, or we will. The vote failed. The Council did not agree to Earth's terms, and with that, next phase began. Because Earth was no longer waiting for the galaxy to catch up, it was preparing for what would come next. The real war wouldn't be against the Red Fang, or pirates, or slave rings. It would be a war of truth against cowardice. And Echo Division had already deployed. There was a time when silence meant safety. A time when unaligned systems, small colonies, fringe planets, independent moons believed that staying quiet, staying neutral, staying out of the Council's games would protect them. They paid their taxes if they could. They obeyed when enforcement ships arrived. They watched when pirates took their neighbors. They said nothing, because nothing was safer than being unnoticed. That time was over now. Silence was a death sentence. And speaking up, that might bring Earth. It started with a transmission from the Renari Belt. Not a government, not a military base, just a desperate transmission from a planetary doctor on YNAR-4. A single voice, panicked and raw. "Please, whoever's listening, our skies are full of raiders. We have no ships, no defense. There are children here. The signal cut out. Seconds later, it was picked up by 5 listening posts. 1 belonged to the Council. The other 4 were Terran, and only 1 sent a response. By the time Earth's vessel dropped from FTL into Renari space, the colony was already burning. A slavering fleet of 6 warships circled above the small jungle world, broadcasting demands, threatening executions, jamming outgoing calls. They never saw the Terran ship coming. It didn't announce itself, didn't flash codes, didn't challenge them. It simply arrived. It acted. The lead slaver ship exploded from within. No beam, no missile, no sound, just a flash. And then it was gone. The other 5 panicked. They opened fire in every direction, but they weren't shooting at Earth. They were shooting blind. Into shadows. Because the real attackers weren't in a ship. They were already aboard Echo Division. Had landed 42 minutes before their ship ever dropped into orbit. They had used stealth pods, ghost entries, no impact signatures, and they were already on every vessel, moving through halls like vapor, killing with precision. Slavers begged for surrender, eyed weapons wildly, screamed into voided calms. None survived. The entire operation lasted 11 minutes. When it was done, the slaver fleet hung dead in orbit, silent. Drifting graves, and the people of Renner 4 walked free. Some wept. Some just stared at the sky. One young boy, no older than 10, painted a crude version of the Earth flag on the side of his home using charcoal and berry juice. His mother asked him why. He said, "'Cause they came, and for planets like Rin or 4. That was all that mattered. Now, but not every call was answered, because not every world had the courage to call early. 2 weeks after the Renari strike, a series of distress signals erupted from the Grelt expanse. Grelt 2, Grelt 5. And the Grelt station had been invaded by the Black Tide, the brutal mercenary syndicate known for leaving no survivors. This time, the council did respond. Slowly, they voted, they debated, they formed a response proposal. The time it was approved, Grelt 5 was gone.
How?
Burned to the core. Grelt Station had been turned into a slave port, and Grelt 2's forests were now full of mass graves. Then finally, the local governor of Grelt 3, watching the horror unfold across his sector, sent a direct message to Earth. Not through council channels, not through diplomatic routes, just a raw public broadcast bouncing off every relay tower in reach. Earth, if you're listening, we're next. The council won't come. I know we're late. I know we waited too long. But please don't let us die in silence. It reached Terran High Command. It reached Echo Division. It reached Commander Ward, the ISV. Revenant arrived before the council fleet even left there. Staging point, Grelt 3 was under siege. 5 black Tithe warships, 1 ground force, thousands of civilians hiding in bunkers. Praying to whatever gods still cared, Echo didn't ask questions. They moved in low orbit. The Revenant deployed atmospheric disruptors, rendering every enemy ship's sensors useless. At the same moment, drop units blinked into existence on the surface. 5 teams, each with a name: Viper, Ghost, Widow, Iron, and Echo Prime. They didn't march. They hunted inside the largest Black Tithe base. Alarms never went off, because there was no time. Terran agents moved room to room, disabling communications, vaporizing weapons stockpiles, leaving trails of bodies with no signs of entry. On the final day, the governor of Grelt 3 walked through the broken gates of his capital compound and saw the Earth flag placed atop the ruins of the Black Tide's HQ. Beneath it, a single line burned into the wall in Terran standard. You waited, but we still came. Across the stars, the message echoed. On colony worlds, kids wore mock Terran armor. On mining moons, workers hung banners saying Earth listens. On border outposts, old commanders quietly sent encrypted pings to Earth's known frequencies, just in case, and in the council. Fear turned to desperation, because the galaxy wasn't just watching Earth. It was choosing Earth, and they were choosing it over their own leaders. One Concord analyst, in a private report that would never be published, wrote the words that summarized: "The new truth, the council rules in paper. Earth rules in action. And action is what the people believe in now. For all their power, all their fleets, and all their whispered legends, there was still one belief that held the galaxy together. That Earth had limits, yes. They had returned. They had crushed the Red Fang. Yes, they had destroyed the slave fleets and wiped out pirate lords in hours. But even a death world had rules. Even humans, as feared as they were, had to draw lines, didn't they? That belief was tested on the cold. Oh, dying world of Valor. Prime Valor wasn't under attack. It wasn't sending distress calls. It wasn't a slave target or a battlefield. It was worse. It was a political experiment. The Concord Council had secretly struck a deal with the Zarnathi conglomerate, a syndicate with credits, influence, and no ethics. In exchange for resources, the Zarnathi were given full control of Valor's population. Officially, it was a stability project. Off the record, it was human experimentation. Entire cities had been transformed into test chambers. Civilians implanted with behavior chips. Children given neural inhibitors to shape empathy. Food was rationed based on obedience. The centers were harvested for their genetic data, and no one on the council spoke of it because it wasn't war, it was science. But someone leaked it. A medical drone escaped Valor, primed during a rare supply flight, and docked with a passing Terran courier ship. The courier pilot, just a freight runner, opened the encrypted logs. What he saw made him weep. He sent the footage straight to Earth, and 3 hours later, Echo Division was activated. In Terran high command. Voices clashed in sharp, heated words. Some wanted full assault, orbital bombardment, complete purge. Others warned this wasn't the same. "This isn't pirates," said General Arya Morgan. "It's not an enemy fleet. These are civilians, victims, and collaborators both. Children. Scientists. Workers under threat." Commander Silas Ward listened silently. Then, finally, he said, "We don't strike the innocent, not even to punish the guilty." That was the line. The line Earth would not cross, but that didn't mean they would do nothing. Echo Division didn't arrive with guns blazing. They arrived with truth. Silas himself led the strike not with weapons, but with exposure. They hacked every satellite, every internal feed, every secret archive, and then they broadcast it all. Across the galaxy, to every screen, every ship, every world, the horrors of Valor streamed live. People saw starving children begging for water, saw families forced to watch each other suffer, saw council officials touring the labs with calm approval. The reaction was instant. Riots on high worlds, military resignations, council buildings, stormed by their own citizens. Even the council's most loyal allies broke ranks in Earth. Earth still hadn't fired a shot. The Zarnathi conglomerate tried to cover it up, claimed doctored footage, blamed rebels. It didn't matter, because a day later, entire Terran Armada moved into Valor orbit, not to bomb it, to stand as witness, to protect the civilians, who had been too scared to speak, to dare anyone to try and stop them. A single broadcast echoed across all Concord frequencies. "We do not need to burn your cities. We will burn your lies." One by one, Zarnathi facilities fell. Not to war but to mass defections. Scientists handed over data. Guards laid down weapons. Victims once terrified walked free, escorted out by Echo operatives in silent black armor. And in the final days, when the Zarnathi CEO offered to negotiate terms, Earth replied with only one word: no. Was arrested, not executed. Not tortured. He was taken and placed in a sealed cell somewhere on Luna Station, where Earth kept monsters not for vengeance, but for memory, to never forget. Across the stars, something changed. Earth had proven that even with the power to destroy, they could choose restraint. Not because they were weak, because they were strong enough not to use it. And that terrified the Council even more than their guns, because now, Earth wasn't just a threat, it was an idea, a symbol, one that couldn't be bombed, bribed, or blocked. And across the outer colonies, graffiti began to appear, spray-painted in Terran standard on walls. Domes, ships, "We are watching, we are remembering, we are Earth." The Council tried to erase it, but the people wouldn't stop. Because they had seen where silence leads, and now they had seen who answers it. It didn't begin with a war. There were no warning sirens, no fleets mustering in formation, no famous admirals giving speeches. There was only a quiet moment, a slow realization that the galaxy wasn't as it had been. Not anymore, it began. With one colony refusing to kneel, a fringe world in the Charon Dust sector, barely large enough to warrant a name, refused to pay its Concord taxes, not because they were rebellious, not because they were armed, because they had been saved by Earth. Months earlier, they had been a raider haven. No law, no defense, no hope, until a single Echo Division squad had arrived without a word and purged the infestation in less than 2 days. The people had never forgotten. So, when Concord collectors came with threats and debt schedules, the people refused. They didn't shout, they didn't fight, they simply said no. When the collectors threatened to return with enforcers, the colony broadcast one simple signal into deep space: "We are under threat. We are not the enemy. We only wish to live. We call now, as Earth taught us, to never suffer in silence." Signal took 32 minutes to travel. Earth answered in 20-9. What came next was not an invasion. It was a reckoning. Terran ships did not fire first. They positioned in high orbit, fully visible, no cloaking, no jamming. Just presence, silent, unclarred. Watching when the Concord enforcement fleet dropped in 6 destroyers, Two cruisers and a command dreadnought. They were greeted not by threats, but by a message. If you fire on civilians, we will end you. If you retreat, we will not pursue. Choose wisely. For a full minute, the command dreadnought didn't move. Then its targeting systems locked onto the colony they called Earth's Bluff. That was the last decision they ever made. What happened in the next 60 seconds would later be analyzed by military academies, feared by tacticians, and remembered by every citizen with a screen. The Earth fleet moved. Not in anger, not in fury, with precision. Orbital rods fell not from the sky but from within it, quantum-guided, impossible to trace, faster than warning systems could detect. Concorde weapons silenced before they could charge. Engines shredded mid-ignition. Shields burned out by electronic pulses no one could block. The dreadnought vanished, a controlled implosion folding it into a microgravity well. No debris, no sound, just gone. The rest of the fleet powered down, and Earth said nothing more, because they didn't need to. The footage reached every world within 12 hours. Not because Earth broadcast it, because the people did. Dock workers, comes officers, civilians on backwater moons. They posted it, they translated it, they titled it with 4 words, "We are not alone." And then something impossible happened. One by one, worlds started disconnecting from the Concorde. Some declared independence, others requested Earth oversight. A few asked to join, not because of promises, not because of threats, but because Earth had become the only name they trusted. Not perfect, not kind, but present, and in a galaxy that had left them to suffer. That was everything inside the Concorde Council. Chaos erupted. Emergency meetings, security lockdowns, talk of war, surrender, propaganda. Nothing worked, because the war had already been lost. Not with weapons, but with truth. Every world had seen Earth step in where the Council had stepped away. Had seen Earth act when others hesitated. Had seen the black armor of Echo Division become the symbol of justice, not just power. And they had chosen, not out of fear, but out of hope. The last broadcast from Earth came not from a warship, not from a general, but from a child, a survivor of Herax, the same boy who had drawn Earth's flag on his shelter wall. He was now 12, standing in front of a holocamera, speaking to 1,000,000 worlds. "I don't know much," he said, "but I know this. When we called, Earth came.
Oh.
When no one cared, they did. Not because we were strong, not because we were important, but because they heard us." He paused and then finished. "That's what power should mean, not fear, but answering the small voices no one else hears." And across the stars, the people listened and remembered and believed. That was the day the galaxy changed. Not because Earth won, because it chose not to rule. It didn't build an empire. It didn't crown a leader. It simply stood there, armed, and Silent had waited for the galaxy to become worthy of its protection. And in the dark reaches of forgotten space, where no light had touched in centuries, a single message echoed through a relay beacon, bouncing between stars. For words, untraceable, undeniable, written in Earth's standard, are still listening.